Hello and welcome to another episode of Five Alarm Task Force. If you're watching the video, if you're listening to the audio, welcome also. You heard our welcome at the beginning of the audio version of the podcast. Happy to be with you again as we begin. It's hard to believe we're in our 8th season already. And my guest today is a returning guest who has been one of the best supporters that this podcast could ever have wished for. He's on as frequently as he can be, considering how busy he is. But my guest today is Chief Charles Werner, former chief at the Charlottesville Fire Department for many years. And since that time that he left that post in Charlottesville, during that time, he has been, like me, a geek. He has been a tech geek, looking for everything and anything that will benefit not just the fire service, but first responders as a whole. And it was the chief who first told us about FirstNet coming out through AT&T, and the expansion of the whole concept of a drone being used in the fire service, in law enforcement, and even in EMS. And today, now we have medications being delivered by drones. There's so much that's happened. Chief, it's a pleasure. Thank you first for taking time from a very busy schedule, and family matters that we're both enjoying at the same time, but those take time too. And thank you for taking that time to join us today again on Five Alarm Task Force.
Yes, so Steve, it's always my pleasure to be with you. I consider you a very dear friend, and have enjoyed our conversations offline as well as what we talk about online. And I want to congratulate you on 8 seasons. That's remarkable. And I think that you said offline before that you kind of didn't think of this, and your friends said you've got a lot of talent and things that you still got to contribute. And look at what you've done. And as you shared with me, and my same experience with the drones, you've had a chance to have an influence globally.
Well, thank you very much. It's we think that if we can bring with each podcast some bit of new information that will help first responders, and of course the fire services is closest to my heart, and as was the EMS, because I did run EMS for a year and a half. It's just my way of giving back to what I love. My active career was cut short due to an injury, but I never let my love for the fire service wane. And this was, I guess, although I was talked into it, this was a great result of that push. And I'm so glad that we've been able to have such great guests as yourself and so many other leaders and instructors and teachers as we attack so many topics, especially today. This year, we're going to really try to focus also on the Firefighter Cancer Initiative and our firefighter behavioral health initiatives, because if we don't work with these two initiatives, and I've had the honor of even teaching my own oncologist, hematologist, and no, I do not have cancer, but I do have to see a hematologist, and in enlightening him about the Firefighter Cancer Initiative. Just today, seeing my gastro doctor, I taught him about PFAS because he saw the results. My hematologist got me covered to get my PFAS testing done because I started in '77, and you and I probably were pretty close at that time. And the testing that was done on the gear, new and used, dated back to '77. So it was always lurking in the back of my mind, did I get this? Did I bring it home? Because those days I'd bring my gear, put it in my car, or I'd have it in the house, especially in the winter when I was up in the Syracuse area. But thank goodness they all came out negative. So this is what we try to do. We want to educate. And sometimes, as my voiceover and good friend Tom Mitten says, elucidate as well. And I feel that's what our podcast is about. And every time you're on, you're actually doing that. You are bringing big news, special news, tech news that most of us in all 3 key branches of first responders can use. So in our conversation through the email this past week, all of a sudden I see this huge number of drone responders. And now I missed it by another 100. So when you sent me the email, it was 8,000. And now you've crossed over to just about 8,100 members. And that is from around the world, correct?
Yes.
Congratulations on an amazing achievement in just the 3.5, 4 years that Drone Responders has been out and about.
Yeah, so we started in 2019, and you know, I started that because similar to you, I was kind of egged into it. People said, "Look, you've been doing a lot of work learning about these drones. Why don't you do something more?" Because agencies were starting to see the value. And I remember in 2016, I wrote an article and I said, you know, I think there might be 7 use cases for public safety. Well, our latest studies are showing that there are 50 use cases for public safety, and almost everything that you can think of, drones are being used for now. And yeah, so last week we topped 8,000, and I sent you the note and said, hey, this is an update. And then this week I looked and we're at 8,100. So I don't know, before long we'll be at 10,000, and it's crazy because as you mentioned, it is global. Most of our members are from the United States. Probably 7,500, 7,600 are from the United States. And then we have another 500, 600 that are from all over the world. And we have participation from every state, and we have participation from 88 countries. So it's kind of, I'm seeing some of these countries that I'm not even familiar with. You know, I try to stay educated, but you know, I haven't had that much time to really sit down and look at other countries. But what's been amazing is the growth. Is we know now there are over 5,000 public safety agencies that have drone programs, and we're seeing them grow every day. And then the ways that we're expanding, as you mentioned, we're doing medical deliveries. You know, Zipline is one company that's out there. It's not necessarily public safety, but they did a really big demonstration. They've done hundreds of thousands of flights over in Africa to deliver medications to underserved areas miles away, and beyond visual line of sight, which is crazy. So we're still having that limitation. We can't do beyond visual line of sight a lot, but we have kind of cracked the nut on that. And we as public safety have kind of led the way of being able to get some of that beyond visual line of sight operations done. And I think I may have mentioned to you last time I was here is drones of first responders starting to happen, where drones are being dispatched immediately from a 911 call off the rooftops of buildings. And they're given the ability to fly 3 miles beyond visual line of sight. Chula Vista was the first in California, and they now have gone over 15,000 flights, and they are on the scene almost all the time first, and they're providing this real-time situational awareness by streaming video to the dispatcher and to officers, police officers out in their patrol cars. So they're seeing these situations as they arrive before they walk into anything. And they said, you know, from a law enforcement standpoint, it's been one of the biggest de-escalators that they have ever had, because it calms everything down, because it's not an unknown that you're walking into.
Well, that's
so
amazing.
Yeah, and then now they're most of these places, law enforcement are doing the drones of what they call drones of first responder program. They're doing it mostly. We were really having a hard time with the FAA getting things approved. You know me, when somebody tells me no, that just kind of spurs me on to try a little bit harder. And you know, I've had to explain to people, you have to understand, like at the FAA, that I'm a firefighter by profession, and I'm used to knocking doors down and apologizing later. So you need to understand that. And the second part you need to know is I'm retired and I really don't care. And so I did shake a few trees and got some things done, and worked with my colleagues in this field. So we went from a year of approvals to get that type of program done to 2 weeks. And we went from a handful of agencies now to 48 agencies that are in the process of doing that drones of first responder waiver to be able to fly beyond visual line of sight. And now the law enforcement is also offering to fly the fire department missions, because they have that in place. So when they have a structure fire, they're able to provide that streaming video now to the firefighters, and they're able to see in advance what they're coming into, and to see, do I need additional resources, or can I return some of the units to service, which has been a big value. But in the fire service, we're seeing one of the greatest examples is Southern Manatee Fire Rescue in Florida. The drone is the first thing that does anything on a hazmat. It does the assessment. So while they've got a report and they're talking to people, the drone's up taking information. It's doing detection to see if it can identify the chemical. It's going in. If it's a leak, they go in close to the leak and zoom in with their capabilities, and be able to see, is it a valve that needs to be replaced? Is it a leak that needs to be patched? And now they have the tools going in. Now, and if they get in there and they need a tool before, you know, if you're in a hot zone, the best you can come out is in a warm zone, and
Right.
you got a suit on, and you can only be in the suit for so long. Well, now the drone can drop the equipment right next to them doing their operations. And now we're seeing connectivity with FirstNet, where they're using FirstNet to connect for the data and the controls, and it's giving some extended flight distances that might go further than the actual controllers of the aircraft. So it's been exciting. We're starting to see police stations look at redesigning their rooftops for drone operations. We're seeing fire departments getting into the drones as first responder program to be able to fly those missions and be able to see. And now the police are also seeing that, fire stations might be the right place to put these on the rooftops to launch from, because they're strategically located for response times. And police stations don't have as many stations because they're
Right.
centrally located and they're out on patrol. So we're seeing all that. We're seeing from a firefighter perspective, one of the most dangerous places we'll operate is on a roof. And now being able to fly on over a roof and do a thermal signature with a drone, you can see structural integrity issues. You can keep firefighters off the roof. It's just amazing what you can see. And I can't remember if I said this before, but I often ask people, would you ever make command decisions with your eyes closed? And of course, the answer is no. Well, without a drone, there's things you're not seeing and making decisions on. So, well, the other thing I was going to say is that you can fly and get really. I was actually on the situational awareness podcast as well, talking about this, saying, we talk about 360s. Well, now we're talking about 360, and we're talking about 6 sides. And really getting the full awareness. So it's been really exciting to see. The technology continues to change. The thermal image cameras continue to improve. Resolution is higher, and now we're seeing with all these emergencies, like out in
Maui.
Hawaii.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to
They're
bring that
using
up.
the
Yeah.
drones to fly over and doing searches of areas. And I'll tell you something that's exciting is I just came from a demonstration 2 weeks ago, a company that brought in some interns and gave them a project and said, okay, we're looking for lost people and we want to use existing technology people have on them to find them. Let's go see what we can do. So they went out and built a module, a receiver that weighs 12 ounces that can fit on any drone, that can pick up Bluetooth signals, that can pick up Bluetooth and Bluetooth low energy. And
Wow.
so that means your watches and your Garmin devices, and it can filter by device, by manufacturer. So if you've got somebody that's lost and you know what phone they use, you can narrow it down to that and start looking for it, and it can fly over and identify within a 3-meter radius the location of where that signal's coming from. And they even tested it. Some of it can be detected from below 12 feet of water.
Holy smokes.
And so think about that now, that you're able to go out and do searches. And then I've been working with Alaska. Alaska does the drones as first responder, but they do it, they want to launch if there is a skier lost or an avalanche.
Avalanche, right.
Well, so imagine now that you can take this device and go out and fly and be looking for people and devices that give signals off. And if it could go through 12 feet of water, it could probably go even further in snow. So that kind of thing with lost people in a forest and all those types of things, being able to use this type of technology, and it continues to change. Now add to that artificial intelligence. We're seeing now where they're creating a repository of different types of sounds, so that as you're flying over an earthquake situation, that it can actually identify things like sounds of clanging metal, or somebody moaning, or somebody crying, or somebody yelling. And the AI says that's an anomaly that we should check out further. And you're starting to mark those things. And so it's, once we crack the true nut of really beyond visual line of sight and we're able to fly a lot more and further distances, it's going to be even more amazing. But so far, there have been over 700 documented lives saved in the past 5 years. And the number of times it's made a difference in finding people, not necessarily to save a life, but finding people and those kind of things, it's been thousands of those operations. We're seeing new and new videos every day.
I know. And if you've been watching the news or watching some of the shows on TV, I was thinking of On Patrol Live, and then also Dick Wolf's very good, because I'm not a big fan of dramatic fire shows, but he did a great job with the LA County Fire and Rescue. We saw them use a drone there. We've seen a drone actually used, and I've seen it in the news here in South Florida. We saw it in the fires just in Washington and Oregon on the news. So we're seeing this, and on this On Patrol Live, we see very often, because it focuses on the law enforcement, we see them often. Someone bails, they've been a chase, and they bail out of the car. Between the dog and the drone, the bad guy's not getting away, because with the infrared cameras on the police drones now, and then the dog picking up the scent. There was one just a week and a half ago where the drone and the dog basically met at the same place, and that's where he was. That's where the bad guy was hiding in the bushes, right there.
Well, on the drone, and for the drone, it's a great safety feature for the canine.
Yeah.
Because it's looking out for the person as well, giving the officers knowledge of where the canine is and where the person is, and then they're able to watch that as it unfolds. But I got one really great story I got to share with you.
Sure, please.
So FDNY started their drone program as a tethered program, to where when they had a second alarm fire, they would put up a tethered drone. Well, that was very limiting in the height and distance and everything. And you might have seen recently in the news, they had the big crane collapse and the crane on fire.
Right.
So you know about Broadcastify, right?
Right.
So Broadcastify lets you listen to radio frequencies and communications from other places. So I listen to New York City a lot, and a friend of mine, Captain Michael Leo, is the lead of what was drone, but now it's their robotics program. They've combined air, land, and sea stuff combined together, and they were one of the first departments in the country to have a full-time drone team. Often these things start off and people think, I don't want those toys. They're just little things that don't make any difference. And then after you've got an operation, it's like, where's the drone? Where's the drone? Where the hell's the drone? So on this particular incident, I was watching it on the news, and I was listening to Broadcastify to the live radio traffic, and I hear this call saying, I can't remember who it was, but so-and-so to command. Command, go ahead. We've got the helicopter over here. We're ready to come in. How would you like us to position? And what about, is our vibration going to cause the issue? And they said, we don't need the helicopter. If you could stay out of the distance, we've got all we need with the drones. And that was one of those aha moments of how much the drones are having an impact. And the reason for that is, one, you've got rotor wash, you've got vibration. Well, now the drones can fly much closer. They can get very high resolution. They can look at it from the side, they can look at it from the top, and they can look at it from underneath. And so they were flying their drones, and they got this outstanding footage of what was taking place, and they knew exactly everything that was involved. And for me, that was the moment I got this big smile on my face of saying, we have arrived. And if you think about it, there are only about 300 public safety helicopter programs in the country. We now already have dwarfed that by over 5,000 agencies now with aviation programs using drones. And it's only going to continue. Now, I'm not saying by any means that this is a replacement for helicopters. It's not. We're limited in the scope and the size and distance. Helicopters have a much bigger mission than being able to traverse more areas. But to see this happen and what they were able to get from it was heartwarming for me to see that success and the acknowledgement by command, which, not too many years ago were really doubtful of what drones had to offer. And then on top of that, what we've seen now is the New York City mayor has seen what's happened with that. The Drone as a First Responder program, he was a former cop. So he now wants to get this Drone as a First Responder program up where it's flying missions from the dispatch to get information from the scene quickly. And they have even had discussions about creating their own full drone division to train their other departments to fly these missions for building inspections, for all kinds of things. And then, one of the other stories we heard is that now the FDNY is flying the shorelines up there on shark patrols. So it's amazing. And then on that side of things, we're starting to see the artificial intelligence, where when you're flying over doing that patrol of what might be in the water, that it can actually identify what you're seeing in the water by the shapes. So it's, this is amazing. And then the next big thing that I'm working on is I'm on the NASA Wildfire Industry Working Group. And so we're looking at how do we enhance the technology of drones so they can get bigger, and that we can actually have drones that could be pre-positioned with either suppressant or water, and we can launch a drone very quickly to identify, or actually be flying drones under red flag days. We get that new warning, and we get that new waiver from the FAA to allow us to fly when there's a red flag day. We can put an aircraft in the air, a drone flying beyond visual line of sight doing reconnaissance, which was never done before. And now imagine if we have pre-positioned larger drones that have this capability of extinguishment, and they are launched as soon as they detect that fire, that's when we can stop it from being catastrophic.
Right.
And now there's another company that's called Overwatch Aero, and they're combining satellite imagery with real-time satellite imagery, and then combining that with drone imagery, and being able to detect very quickly the location of early fires, understanding the magnitude, the direction. So there are so many things. It's hard for me to even imagine in this short podcast that we'd be able to cover so much that's happening.
It's amazing. And you brought up a very good point. We've stressed, and as a chief, the same important value of doing a 360. And we've been the last few years, and we've done it here to promote the fact that the only right way of doing a 360 is you have to have that FLIR, take it out of the truck. It does not need to stay in the truck when you get on scene. That's what it's there for. Use it, and it'll tell you more about what you're going to do. The drones with the infrared capability are doing, I've seen now through Andy, some of these videos where we see these drones doing great jobs detecting, and in practice, detecting a warm human body in a structure and where it is. And you can then see, is it erect? Is it lying down? And you make a much more informed decision for the action that the IC will provide for the first team going in, of where, what, who, when, etc. Just by having that drone up there and relaying the information to the IC.
Yeah, and you think about it, when you've got these major incidents, you had the fertilizer fire in Winston-Salem,
right?
And they were using drones. They had multiple drones from different agencies, and they were able to connect with DroneSense, and they were able to coordinate their flights and be able to take the video imagery into one central location and be able to fly that. So one, they're able to fly it inexpensively, and they're able to keep an eye watch on what's happening with that safely. And then Palestine, Ohio, same thing. They were using the drones to do this constant monitoring, and they were using it to decide, are we going to set this thing on fire, or what are we going to do with it? And then to monitor that continuous operation throughout. So we're going to continue to see just phenomenal imagery of what's happening. And now, the other day, a guy was telling me, he said, what I'm really trying to do is to make sure that when we have a structure fire, that we want to try to get a tethered drone up with thermal imagery, like a photokite, and be able to let it sit and just capture all of the information of what takes place from the time we got there until we knock it down. Because what happens is, from an investigator standpoint, you want to know what happened, where was the fire, where did it spread to, all the different characteristics. And they're saying it's just phenomenal of what it can give us in the way of investigations.
Again, this will change the fight, the next 10 years in the fire service and beyond. But I think that as I know the SAFER grants, I believe, are including drones now as well. And I think that the more we see, you mentioned FDNY, but FDNY in LA County, LA City are the ones that are always out there. But I think what you've been able to share and see is that you don't have to be a 6,000 member safety team. You can have a small fire department that maybe has 30, 40 people, but that drone gives you the power that those 30, 40 couldn't even do altogether.
Yeah, and I'll say one thing I want to make clear to everybody is that there's a lot of places the police department may be an agency that's providing drones, and the fire department hasn't done it yet, because there are probably so many more uses for police from a safety standpoint,
Right.
you know, in the number of calls that they have. Uh, but if your police department has a drone program and you don't, reach out to them, and maybe you can combine your efforts, because what we're seeing is that some departments start from a police department and they still don't have enough remote pilots. Well, we as a fire service, we have people, if we have any kind of career personnel, we've got people on duty 24 hours a day. And I saw this even in one of my own experiences talking to the department, that the police department was started a program and had 4 remote pilots. And the fire department had also started a program and they had 12 remote pilots, and kind of connected the two. And they're like, well, you know, why don't we work on this together? And when you as police don't have somebody to fly, we got somebody that can cover. And so now those discussions are taking place. So if you're out there as a fire department, uh, don't not take advantage. Reach out to your police. If they fly for you to do the missions, that's great. Or if you can become a part of the team and help provide additional remote pilots, it's just a win-win for everybody.
You know, it's funny that you mentioned that. And a couple of years ago, there was a lot of discussion on social media about, you know, the various generations coming up behind us, and that these people are coming in, they have no background in the fire service, they all they do is watch video games, stuff like that. Well, number one, as I said, yeah, they play a lot of video games, and now you have a bunch of those kids from 21 to 30 flying the military drones all around the world. Now, these kids who are coming into the fire service, they may not have any knowledge of fire equipment. I didn't. I happened to walk into a volunteer firehouse, walked out with the application, and next thing I know, I was a firefighter and being trained. But I was hungry. I was hungry to learn, and I tried to get I took in as much as I possibly could. But the fact is that these younger people coming in, I can guarantee you, if you look at their thumbs on their phones or on their tablets, or there's a video game, an Xbox or PlayStation in the firehouse, I bet you those guys can move their hands faster than the rest of us. And these are the great people that you could use to look to say, hey, Billy, Sam, Kathy, and Sue, listen, I've seen you guys, what you do with the games, stuff like that. We're thinking to do a drone program. I think you 4 would be our first pilots. If you guys are interested, I'd like to see if we'd be able to do it. And they have that eye-hand coordination that an old fart like me doesn't have anymore.
Well, I'll give you a quick example to reinforce what you're saying. So when I got my first drone, it was a Parrot drone, and it was operated by the phone. You know, you did on your phone controls. It was all finger stuff. And I was out flying around. I was doing okay. And then my son came out, and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm flying the drone." He said, "Well, let me see that." And you know, after about 5 minutes, I said, "Give me the phone, go inside." He had embarrassed me so much about how good he was at doing this stuff. And, you know, I had been doing this for a couple hours, and he comes out and just does it. It's exactly what you're saying. And you know, I wrote, you know, one of my early technology articles for Firehouse Magazine, I wrote, as you're looking at technology today, take advantage of the youth coming into your department, because they live technology. And so when you're talking about some of these things, and that's how we developed in the fire department, in the Charlottesville Fire Department, we transitioned from computers to iPads, because I had 3 firefighters that were younger that came in and said, "Chief, we think this iPad can do lots of stuff. It can provide us with automatic location stuff, which before would have cost you millions of dollars to do, you know, AVL stuff." And so I said, "Okay, well, let's do a pilot." We put it on 3 apparatus, and we could see the calls we were going to. It mapped the routes. It could see the other apparatus that had iPads on them where they were en route. It could put in the pre-fire drawing information and hydrant locations. And it was like, okay, this is no brainer. You know, I'm going to spend a fraction of the cost on the technology, get 10 times the capabilities I had before. It's instant on. I'm not waiting for the computer to warm up. I don't have to sign in and do a login. And now it's on all the apparatus. And a lot of departments did that, but it's taking advantage of that youth in your department. And now with drones, that's just another example. And, you know, I talked to you before, it's not just drones anymore. It's drones, it's GIS, it's broadband, it's broadband, it's real-time streaming, and all these things interconnect with drones.
Let's tell some of our listeners and viewers who may not know what GIS is, please.
Yeah, so geographic information systems, that's the mapping stuff that you're seeing. And a great example is when it came to the fires out in California, the huge fire like the Camp Fire, they were using the GIS to take snapshots with an application called Hanger, which could create a 360-degree view of very high
Wow.
resolution in the areas that were heavily damaged. And they could put those up on the map. And that was primarily for one, damage assessment, but it also was used to inform the people that had been evacuated that they could go in and click on those icons and see a 360 view of their community. And in many cases, they were totally destroyed. But you got to know, you need to know what's my situation like and what am I going to have to do next. And that helped to give people either uh, a resolution that their home was okay, or that they had to start doing some planning and really start talking with their insurance companies and get things moving. So again, I could go on for hours about the things that I'm seeing, hearing, and having a chance to be involved with.
Well, that's amazing. And since we've started this and you discussing this together over the past couple of years, it is really amazing to see the rapid growth. And I guess the most important thing and the best thing that comes out of this is this new drone technology. And as it continues to develop, we know that now they're also talking about drones, commercial vending, so they can drop packages off at your home and stuff like that. But I think the way we look at it is that we have public safety, and that's what comes first to all three of our branches. And this tool, which started off as a little hobby thing that you saw in these little commercials on TV, little helicopters and little tiny drones flying around like bumblebees. Now we have the professional drones. Folks, if you've been to the movies, you watch them on TV, anytime in the last probably 5 to 8 years, a lot of the beautiful panoramic shots and overhead shots you saw were done with a drone, which saved the production tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of helicopter airtime. And yet they carry the same big pictures. They do IMAX cameras. This is what technology is for all of us, but we focus on public safety because that's most important to us and how we take care of the people in our communities, because that's first. Technology can be great, but we have to be able to use it. We have to be able to use it so that we get the information we need. Where it's kind of lifting that dark cloth sometimes that we get at a certain point where I can't see any more than this, but that drone gives us the entire picture.
Well, and to your point, I think the exciting thing is I've had some conversation with some of the companies doing deliveries, and I said, "Hey, I got a question for you from a public safety perspective." And one was UPS and some others that are looking to get into on a bigger scale. It's still the visual line of sight stuff limits things right now, but once that's opened up and we have the right detect and avoid technology, we're going to see this literally take off even more than we can imagine. And I said, "Hey, listen, during disasters, you guys are kind of shut down, right?" And they go, "Yeah, there's not things are not operating as normal, blah, blah, blah." I said, "But what do you think during that time you change over to a disaster mode and use your drones to deliver supplies to people who need water or food or whatever?" And they went, "Hey, let's talk. That sounds like a great idea because we get downtime. We can take advantage of that downtime." And I said, maybe even some things we can link up with as far as FEMA maybe down the
I
road.
was just going to say,
So,
yeah, FEMA.
so it's like I say, we've only seen the tip of the iceberg with that. And then the next thing, I've written about is artificial intelligence, being able to take all this stuff and add a whole bunch more analytics to it. It's going to see things that we're not going to necessarily be able to see much quicker, and give us that information so we can find somebody quicker. Then the other thing that I'm working on now is that move toward advanced air mobility. What's it look like to the bigger vehicles? So now I'm looking toward the ideas of air ambulances that are drones, and the big air firefighting drones for wildfire fighting and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that I heard somebody someplace over the last couple of weeks talk about what for wildfires, WUI. They were talking about how valuable the drones that they have now they're using to scope out these fires, but they also said, what if we can instead of waiting for helicopter drops and the big tankers to come in, what if we had drones that could carry, as you said, suppressant or water and go in and hit spot fires so we can concentrate our crews where they're most needed for the worst and let the drones and their operators take care of the spot stuff to kind of like open up the deployment a little bit better for us. And I thought that was a brilliant idea. You know, again, nobody wants to see a drone crash and burn, but I'd rather see that than any of our firefighters get caught up.
Which we just saw recently. We just saw a helicopter crash not too long ago in a wildfire operation.
Right. Well, yeah, right here in Florida, we had it yesterday. We had a tragic.
Well, that was yesterday, but a while back, within a month or two ago, we had a helicopter crash during a firefighting suppression system.
Yes.
So yeah, and you know, in Charlottesville during the protest that we had, that you know it was national news. We had a helicopter from Virginia State Police that was flying up and down over the downtown mall. Well, first of all, it's limited because of tree canopy and that kind of stuff. You can't see much below it. But it just so happens that as tragic as that was, fortunately, the helicopter had been detailed to do an overwatch of the governor coming in out in a rural area, and that's when it crashed. It had a catastrophic failure of a part of the helicopter, which I think is the same thing that happened in Florida.
Yes,
is it looked like something just broke on that thing and it just went down. But
right at the boom, yeah, you could see the smoke.
But had they been flying over the downtown mall when that occurred, what we could have been doing with a drone could have created a tremendous mass casualty incident, huge fire and economic loss for the city. So we are starting to see much more acceptance of saying, you know, there's a time and place for both, and let's maximize how we complement the drones and the helicopter operations together.
Right. And that's, listen, we all have the same goal, and that is protect our people and properties, communities. You know, and that's what we care about.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of my summary for now. I could talk to you for hours about this and probably still go on for another day. But I think I've kind of given you an insight of where we are and where we're going. And again, the drone programs are making a big difference. And I think you're going to see in 5 years, you're going to see the number triple, if not more, in the number of departments that have public safety drone programs.
And I think,
I just want to make sure I tell you, everybody,
sure.
Look, DRONERESPONDERS.org. We've got the largest resource center, 800 documents. Membership is free. I don't get paid for anything I do with drone responders. It's like I'm here to serve and pay back the time that I got out of what I did. And we've got the biggest global public safety directory and dashboard that we did with NASA and Esri. We now have partnerships with NASA, Esri, MITRE, ASTM, and now we've had forged some new partnerships with UAS Norway and Interpol. So we're doing some international type activities that again continues to blow my mind.
That's amazing, and thank you, because I think the more that our listeners and viewers understand about the value of drones and what they can do, hopefully they'll take that and say, wait a second, you know what, maybe our department should look into this and see what we can do with this.
And you know, one last thing I want to share is that I learned that some of the community emergency response teams, the CERT teams, in some cities are using their CERT teams to get remote pilots. So you can get volunteers to be your pilots. Just get them to go through the training and do the same thing you would train your people, and trust that they're going to follow the policies and procedures as you set up. So take advantage of that. If you're short and you don't think you can do it with another way, look at your CERT members and see if that's an opportunity.
Great idea. Great idea. All right, folks, we're going to take a break. Just want to remind you again, DRONERESPONDERS.org, and you can get all the information there. You can learn if you don't know anything about it, but you want to learn more, that's the place to go. They have, you have to go back to the website. It's amazing. DRONERESPONDERS.org. We're going to take a break here, folks. And when we come back, we'll have Chief Werner will be talking about other tech that's big in public safety, as well as it's already being used in some places and what's coming down the road. So we'll be right back with more with our guest, Chief Charles Werner, right after these words. As always, please stay tuned. Hello and welcome back to this episode of 5 Alarm Task Force. I'm your host, Steve Green. Happy to be here with you and happy to have you here with us. And my guest today is Chief Charles Werner. Chief was the chief of the Charlottesville Fire Department, which was it a combo already when you were there, or was it just volunteers mostly?
No, it was combination department.
Combination. But I remember the first time driving by, coming out of Greensboro, heading north, and we came around. Instead of going to the main highway, we just came nice and easy. And somebody pointed, oh, that's the Charlottesville main station. I looked at this huge building, and I said, wait a second, you tell me there were volunteers that work in that department? They said, yeah, there's volunteers. He goes, I think it's combo, but they got volleys there too. I said, oh my God, look at, it's like a palace. I mean, this is where anybody would want to go to. It was a beautiful sight. And then once I saw it, I learned more about it, started looking up and seeing what a great department it was and how high they were, and with tech, that you brought them every tech advantage that you could, that you felt was worthwhile, not just for them, but for the task at hand in the fire service. And so the chief has kept that interest and that passion for tech and how we apply that tech can be used in public safety. And as I mentioned in the first segment, that if you've seen newscasts, national, local, you've seen major bulletins come across the TV, and a lot of those aerials, I'd say probably today, most of those aerial shots that you see on these news stories are done through drones. As the chief said earlier, yes, a lot of places still have helicopters, and they're necessary in many, many places. If you ever seen the roof of LAPD, I'm not sure if they still have it that way, but that they had that main headquarter building where on the roof, their entire air program of helicopters was located. They may have changed that now, but the fact is that we've used aircraft to help us in our jobs for years. That's nothing new. But the fact of bringing drones and new technology to the fire service, and yes, we know the two things that firefighters detest the most are the status quo and change. Well, you know what? That's life. You were born single, maybe you're married now, or you got a significant other. Maybe you have kids now. That's life. Things change. And so technology changes, and it's our job in public safety to learn as much as we can and use as much as we can of technology to help us save lives and property in our communities. That's what it boils down to. And no, you don't have to be a 5,000 complement fire department or police department or EMS. You can be a relatively small department. You can have a 50-person department, 150. There are drones available, plus there are now grants available through the SAFER program that we believe, we're not sure, but the chief is going to check on that. But if they are, then you have a way of putting yourself at a new level of providing basically what could be life-saving services to your community by using a drone. And all you have to do, again, DRONERESPONDERS.org. For any information you need, you can start there. And if they don't have it, they will guide you to where it is. So we're back now with Chief Werner, and we're going to be talking about some other tech that's out there and helping us, again, as first responders and public safety, all three of our branches. And one of them, many of you probably have heard of FirstNet. And that is a program that AT&T put together and bid for to help us with our communications. How many times have we've heard through radio traffic that's put on other podcasts or for the news where we need somebody at some place and we don't have that person there. We don't know where to go. FirstNet has the ability of not just being a telephone, but FirstNet has the ability to make that phone into a radio. Correct, Chief?
That's right. It's interesting that, let me first differentiate a little bit of, we've seen different sales ads from different carriers about first responder programs or, they give priority. The one big differentiator with AT&T FirstNet is they have band 13, which is a specific allocation of frequency that allows public safety to use that directly, and it allows for priority and preemption. Priority is one thing, preemption is another. Priority means that you get first, but if it's busy, priority doesn't make any difference. Because when you have a certain capacity load, large audiences, large groups of people in an assembly, it can take up that bandwidth very quickly. You've probably seen that if you've ever tried to transmit a video when you're in a big event, and it's like kind of like this stall moment, and it just kind of sits there and doesn't do anything. Right. Well, with FirstNet, it actually can identify those people that have band 13 authority, and it can preempt. In other words, it can kick people off the system that are not the priority first responders. That's not something never done before. And I will tell you that I remember in the early days before FirstNet was known as FirstNet, when we were talking about this discussion of the D block, we had this question where we were in the room with all the carriers, and the question came, you will give priority, but will you give preemption? And the only reason that FirstNet went forward at that point was because every carrier in the room said, not only no, but hell no, we're not going to give you preemption. Advanced to today, we now have that capability. Now, when you look and comparing the other carriers, they don't have the preemption capability the same as that, because they have a specific core and a frequency band that's specifically isolated. But I know when we were in offline, I remember you asked me about, well, what about that X, Y, and Z thing that was coming? Well, NextNav, I believe it's NextNav that has now contracted with AT&T and some of the other carriers as well to give that X, Y, and Z component. And for those of you who don't know what X, Y, and Z means, usually when you see coordinates, you'll have X and Y. So you know where a person is physically located out in the open somewhere. Well, Z is that elevation factor, that now in a building, you could see not only X and Y, but you could see Z. So you can physically see, once you have a map, a 3D map, where somebody is physically located in a building. And that's kind of exciting, especially if you can do that X, Y, and Z capability for somebody who's calling into the system as well. So you can see they're located, especially in large cities. And I believe it's by this year or next year, I can't remember which one now, that 50 cities, 50 of the major cities are supposed to have the NextNav system in place. That's a system that operates separately, but gives you that capability. And as I was mentioning to you offline, one of the things that we've been hoping for is that this system that can be in place can also be on firefighters and police officers and other responders, and maybe even be able to transmit biometrics. So it could give heartbeats, maybe respirations, and indicate, not necessarily you seeing it all the time, but having thresholds set. I once wrote an article about data, and data is only good when it's the right data at the right time to the right person. If you have all the information to everybody at the same time, that's just chaos. So the idea is to have thresholds that show when a person's heartbeat may be going over go to a dangerous rate, or respirations drop to where they're not maybe doing it within the time frame that they should, and hopefully that combination of the callers and the responders creates this whole new dynamic of us being able to see how that technology works. And then I'll just tag into that. The next big thing that I see coming is this next generation of 911. So I've been in those discussions, and it was funny because I went to an APCO Broad Emerging Technologies conference and got there, and I was hammered by all these dispatchers saying, "We don't want any more information. We're already overwhelmed with information. Please don't do that." I said, "Stop. I want you to think a minute. What technology, what information would you like to have that could make your lives easier?" And they're like, "What do you mean?" I said, "Okay, you take a call, and you're taking a call of a description of a person who's done something wrong. Would you rather have to sit down and take a description, or just get them to send you a picture?" And they went, "Oh." And then you transmit that picture to all the people on the system. So they didn't have to give you a word except, "I got a picture, send it," okay, or video, even better. You've captured the license plate, the license tag, and now I can push a button and receive it, and push another button and send it out to everybody that needs it. You just did all that without actually talking. And they're like, "Oh." I said, it's kind of like we're using the stuff now with automatic vehicle location for proximity dispatch. That we're sending the closest unit because the system already looks and sees where the units are and says, "That one's closer, send it." There wasn't a conversation like calling units to say, "Where are you, where are you, where are you?" It already knows. And then the push buttons that you arrive on the scene through the system, through your CAD, it already does it, communications aren't necessary. So we've cut down all this confusion of, when a unit's back in service, and people are like, oh. And then, I had one of my former officers pull me aside the other day on this technology piece and said, well, Chief, all that stuff you've been talking about's here. And I'm like, what do you mean? He pulls up this app tied into the radio system, and it's like a freaking radio. It's got all the talk groups in it, all the channels. You can pick it up at each one of them. You can scan the ones you want to pick, and you can talk on that phone. And now if you're using FirstNet, you've got priority and preemption. It's like your own radio system that wherever you have internet, you're now connected to your radio system. So that was one of the things, the great early experiences I had with Nextel, is that push to talk that took place. Is I was in conferences in California, and we had been one of the first departments to interface Nextel push to talk with our radio system. So I could call in and say, okay, patch me to the working fire talking group. Didn't have the same luxuries of all the things they have now,
Right.
but I could be in touch with those people and be involved with that incident when I was in California. And people are like, how are you doing that? And now today it's just matter of fact, there it is.
I want to jump back to when we're talking about the preemption. We know from the various reports that come in after a line of duty death, and one of the major causes is radio traffic. That either the department only has a couple of channels and they were being used up, or they have a bigger system with talk groups, but too many people were on. They weren't going to the right channel. The person calling the Mayday was pushing the button, and we didn't get through, and we lost that brother or sister. The concept of preemption, I have to say, could be a lifesaver, without a doubt. Because that firefighter, that police officer who's down, that paramedic who got hurt, can activate and know that through that they can get onto their radio, report their situation, and hopefully expect help very shortly. And I think when and as well as I do, is we talked about 360s and how you using a flare when you do it, and then the 360 advantage, more than 360 advantage that the drone gives us with its high view. But the fact is that we still have humans going into these buildings and doing these rescues. And we need to make sure that we have everything lined up to keep them as safe as possible. And this, I think, with preemption can be a game changer just for this very fact that if one preemption saves the life of one of our first responders, then it's worth every single penny that department and all the departments and the company put together, because that one life, there's no value we could put on it more than our own hearts. And so that's
I'll just go back to reference Morgan O'Brien, the CEO of Nextel, is the guy who came up with the concept of FirstNet. And he's the one that pushed from a non-public safety perspective as a company and said, this needs to happen for public safety. And then he, along with a number of us who sat down and talked about that in the beginning, to say, this is a good idea, and then watch it, develop over time. And I remember it was one of the strongest cohesive operations of lobbying in our history of communications. Police, fire, EMS, emergency management, everybody were all on the same page, stood firm, and we basically told Congress, we're not going away. And that's how FirstNet came to be. And it was amazing to see that cohesiveness, which we can lose a lot more of now. We can continue to pull back, but we have so many things on the way of technology. The thermal image cameras, as you mentioned earlier, using that for 360 outside is something that should always be done, just because it gives you that idea of fire that you might not know it's there. Or if you're looking inside, you can see a person that you wouldn't be able to see, especially if you're in a firefighting situation. We were one of the first departments in the country also to have thermal image cameras on every active firefighter that went in the building.
I mean, every firefighter?
every on-duty firefighter.
Oh, wow.
And so that when you went in, everybody had thermal image camera, and that was just one of those changes we decided to make, and it was made a huge difference because you got to train with them because your thermal imaging means certain depending on the signatures because whether it's a hot or cold makes a big difference. But you can see holes in floors, you can see hidden fires behind walls, you can find people that are in the building that you couldn't see before that you could go over 5 times and miss them. And now be able to save lives. So between the communications technology, the location technology, as I mentioned before, the GIS information, and now we're starting to get into GPS location stuff, geopositioning satellites, and being able to use that to locate where you are. We've got so many technologies. And again, just to repeat what you said earlier, use your talent coming in from your new younger generation. They live this technology and they can probably show you some things we're seeing. I'll give you a funny example. There was the story. I don't know if we talked about this before. I don't know if we talked since we had the collapse in Florida.
Miami. Yeah, no, we haven't. Yeah.
So it was funny. I wrote the article for Firehouse Magazine, and I was going in to talk about technology and communications. Well, you know what the story of that whole seaside collapse was, or surfside collapse was? Drones.
Yeah.
The first thing that was used is a drone to light the scene of the collapse area to be able to look for surface survivals because that was the only ones that were likely to be alive.
Right.
The second thing is it was used to go into areas that were collapse areas that weren't safe to go into to find out if there were survivors. It was used to fly into the areas that were collapsed that people couldn't get out because the stairwells were blocked or collapsed and determine where they were to get aerial towers to them. And but the funny thing about the technology and the youth is that I said, how did you guys coordinate your different drone flights? They had like 5 or different teams, different USAR teams that were flying drones. They divided the areas up and they were actually communicating flight operations over WhatsApp, which is an application that allows you to text back and forth about what it is and set up groups. And they were saying, okay, we're taking off now over here in quadrant 1. Okay, we're taking off over here in quadrant 2. And they all knew what was going on a simple app over a phone that actually came up from some of the younger people that said, why don't we use WhatsApp?
That's amazing. And I think and I hope that if you're listening to us or you're watching the video and you've got several years under your belt already, maybe 10 years under your belt or more, and maybe you've looked disdainfully at some of these younger kids who coming in and they look so fresh and raw. How can I make that person a firefighter? Well, you know what? It's not always what you can do. It's also what the new person can do. What are their talents? And I think that's important that when we conduct the interviews for people applying to any of our branches, I think we need to go a little deeper and find out what are their passions. What are they interested in? You could have a kid who's been flying drones for 10 years and he can do them, goes through the circles, he goes to the meets and the competitions, and he flies them through the holes and the triangles, stuff like that, and he's a gold medal winner. You're going to tell me you wouldn't want to invest some time and effort into training this young man or young lady to do a drone operation or something else electronically or technologically in your department? I would scoop them up in a minute if everything else is okay on the application. But find out who they are.
Yeah, and you talk about technology, and I'll go a step further beyond just the technology piece. I had this idea that said, I think there's a way that we can get every single firefighter engaged in the department in some way. And so I put it out and said, look, all of us have different interests. I'd like you to look around this department and to see if there's something that you'd like to work on, something that you'd like to help fix or make better. And I'll give you the power to run it, to manage it. I don't care what rank you are. And I had 5 people that reached out to me, and I'll give you one example. This one person who was kind of the person that came in and went home, didn't do much more than what they were asked, who said, nobody's ever offered or asked that. And he said, I've always had this frustration about the management of the batteries for all of our radios and stuff. And I, well, what do you suggest? He said, well, there's this new device. It does rotation of the cycling of the battery charging, and it can have all this stuff going, and we can have extra batteries going, and it'll extend the life of the batteries. And I went, okay, do you want to run it? And he said, yeah, I do. And I said, okay, well, put down in the policies and procedures and how you want it to work. Tell me what technology we need to buy to do it. And we did it. And he and the other people that came forward were now running these programs as firefighters. And as I mentioned before, we put the iPads on the apparatus that came from 3 firefighters. They ran the program. I say, the bottom line is, if you have the talent, interest, and ability, I'm going to empower you to move this program, and I'm going to ask everybody else to support what you're doing.
That's terrific. And I actually went through the same thing when I was up in the department outside of Syracuse, and I got hurt, so I couldn't be active responder. But I said to the chief, I said, look, how about we set up a video unit? And I had already been I started in video in 77 with my own company. And I said, he goes, well, what would it be? I said, well, they have these new compact cameras, charger. I can put it into the heavy rescue. It'll trickle charge in there. When we need it, I'll meet you at the scene in my private car with your permission, and I'll handle the camera. And then we have after action review. I said, what better, whether it's a real call or it's a one of our training calls, we'll have that video and we can sit back in the rec room and watch it. And he said, I like it. Give me a quote and tell me how much it'll cost. So this was 84. It was going to run about 1,500 for the old JVC mini VHSC thing, but it worked. I mean, it was there. It was a tool. I still stayed involved. I wasn't donning my gear and running, in the cab, but I went on any major call and shot the video, and they loved it. And it was simple.
So you kind of opened up another door of technology that I'm working on.
Okay.
I hadn't really thought about this before, but this is something that I'm going to introduce you to the guy who's doing this, that you can bring him on your show and talk to people about an opportunity. Got a friend I've known for 30 years, and we did cell phone stuff. Early in my career, I did a cell phone company while I was at the fire department. We actually rented the cellular telephones out to people because they were so expensive still, and people couldn't use. So we were renting radio stations and all that kind of stuff. When I was a firefighter, when you're working that 24 on, 24 off, and 4-day break, you can do all these other things. Well, we've talked recently, and we realized if you look at the media right now, YouTube, all these different Instagram, all these different things, Twitter. What's the big thing? It's video. So he created a program called Online Video Mastery Program, and what he does is he teaches people how to capture video using your cell phones, the devices that you have, and to work with the department to say, look, all of you that have different cell phones, if you see something that's going on, training, public education, a public event, take some video. And if you do, maybe even to interview people. And then he teaches you how to piece that together into videos that you can use for recruitment, that you can use for training from the devices that you already have, and in the events and the places that you already are. And so now take that imagery, or not imagery, but take that video and put it up into a Dropbox to where maybe 1 or 2 of the people are actually doing the editing. And if you don't want to do the editing, he's even offering a package that he'll do the editing for you if you're doing stuff, because we just did he's working on the easiest recruitment video ever made. That's kind of how it was to do, and just it's very quick. We did a great drone video, for example, for the department just starting a program, and it's this 1-minute video telling about their drone program. And hey, our drone program has just started. We're doing this. Our chief has said he wants to make sure we have the technology to serve our community best. And that we're doing it the right way. We're addressing the privacy issues. We're flying. If you see our drone in the air, it's on a mission, and we're not doing random reconnaissance. And in 1 minute, it just told this story about their new drone program for the community, and it's gone to a lot of departments around the country now. They're looking at that video saying, how do we do that? But it's a new concept of taking your idea that you said and that you did, and the value of what it does. So you're doing a simple training session, get one of the people to take the phone and just capture that little session that's taking place, and now it suddenly becomes a training log.
Training log or recruitment page as well. It is. I mean, today, you know, when cameras first came out on cell phones, it was the bane of the stringers. When we were working on our other show, America's Heroes, we had stringers all across the country that would send us video. That was great, but they also would sell to their local TV station, which was fine. We had no problem with that. They were kind enough to send it to us at no cost. But then cell phones came with cameras, and then everybody had a camera. And there's good things to that, and there's not so good things that come out of that. But,
yes, there is.
But what you've just stated is such a phenomenal idea, because, again, I had to go through, having learned video and audio in an analog age. When I started doing the podcast and started doing the video, I had to start learning how to do all that digitally, which was a whole lot different than just taking tape, marking it with a grease pencil, and cutting it on a block in the old days, and then making sure it matched up so you didn't screw up the story. But the fact is that our phones are more than just a way of communicating one person to another. We have the ability, and we've seen it. You've all watched newscasts where somebody, you know, even our tragic loss yesterday, where we lost a wonderful pilot member of the Broward County Sheriff's Office Fire Service Division, Fire Rescue Division. And there was, besides the coverage that the local stations' helicopters had, you had multiple people with videos that sent them into the news stations. And we actually got to see the moment where the helicopter had taken off, things were fine. And then suddenly you start seeing that smoke coming out from the connection where the boom hits the canopy. And then we saw the tragic end, unfortunately. But that video is going to be something that the FAA itself wants to see, even though it's done by Joe Citizen. They're going to want to see that. Right, and NTSB are going to want that, because they need to see every moment they can until impact, or until it lands safely, maybe with a rough. You know, unfortunately, there was no opportunity to do an auto rotate because they lost the ability of the tail rotor. But the fact is that your video, whether you're in a department or you're just a citizen on the street, that video that you take can have value. And I don't mean you can sell it to a station because they barely pay anything, if anything at all, most stations today, because it's so easy. But there's more to it that you can do to help the department, to help the city government, local government, help the federal government. I mean, this video from yesterday is already in demand. They want to see what happened. And that's what you can do. And again, you don't have to be a firefighter. You don't have to be in law enforcement or EMS. You can be the average person out there with a cell phone that has a camera. You see something, you take it, and you if you think it's necessary, let the authorities know that you have it.
But my goal is, every member in your department probably has a cell phone with a camera. Is get them in the mindset, if you got something good, capture it. You don't have to be an expert video camera person. Just turn your camera on and capture what it is. It can be a moment that you're doing a public education. You're doing something really cool with a kid. It can be a recruitment video. You know, you're capturing different pieces that are going to be part of that recruitment video. And now you have this way of capturing this B-roll that you can now pull all together to create that final product. And it can be done very affordably with your personnel without a lot of training. So I'll introduce you to him, because you ought to have him on your show.
That'll be great. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Well, folks, we have learned a lot of tech today. Some of it could be confusing, but if you're interested in a drone program for your department, law enforcement, fire rescue, EMS, just reach out to Drone Responders. They can help guide you. They can give you advice. They can point you in the right direction for things you're looking for or looking to learn about. They'll be there to help you with it. And as we learn about the other tech with FirstNet, how valuable it is, and besides the convenience it offers to everybody connected, it could be a lifesaver as well. and we're talking about the location system, nav, what was that again? Nav,
XNav.
X, X,
NextNav.
XNav, XNav coming out so we can see where somebody is in a building. If they say, I can't find the exit, I don't know where I am. If they have that connected with them, they'll see their IC will see it. We'll see where they are through that program. And then, as we're talking about the videos as well, yeah, it's great to have a nice movie camera, video camera. But you know what? You have that. If you have a cell phone, you have a camera. And you can make that camera do good for your community. That's what it boils down to. All of this tech isn't for glory, isn't to do anything more than protect the lives and property of the people in our communities. That's what it boils down to, folks. This is not, I hate to use it's so trite, but it's not rocket science. It might sound like it if you're not a real tech person, but it can be a lot simpler. And there are plenty of people out there, as the chief just said, there's a gentleman who's willing to help with videos, to help teach you how to take a good video and how to work with it and what to do with it and what not to do with it. But the fact is that our business requires us to be at the top of our game 24/7. That's it. That's who we are. It's what we do. Whether we're career, part pay, volunteer, WUI, this is our job. Protect our communities 24/7 the best way we can. That's what it boils down to. Chief, again, my sincere thanks for taking time out of a very busy schedule. I don't even know how we got this much time without you taking a call or something like that, having to do it. But it's great to have you on again. Thank you so much for the information that you share. I just want to hope and pray that every listener, every viewer will take this information to heart and want to do something positive with it in their communities. That's what these shows are about, folks. Just to help the men and women from our call takers, our dispatchers, our people in the field, our firefighters, our police officers, our sheriffs, our paramedics and EMTs, our road recovery people, our road rangers. These people are all important in everything we do. Sometimes we won't even know about a collision on a superhighway unless the road ranger tells us exactly what the situation is. Yeah, we may get 100 calls to the dispatch center, but it's the road ranger who gets there and gives us the details. All these people are part of our family as first responders. It's not just the people who wear the bulky clothes or the badges or stethoscopes around the neck. It's everyone who deals from the moment you call the emergency number or 911 in your community. Everybody in this group is going to be there to see what they can do to help you out. And it's a technology that we've talked about today that's going to make that job easier and faster in some situations. And we know that in many, time is of the essence. And we don't have time to just spend making things up. We need to have the facts. We need to provide that to whoever's in charge of the scene and make sure they're using it to the best of their ability as well. So
let me just say something if I could
Sure,
before you
Chief.
hang up
Sure.
on this call. I want to say that you pointed out something very important. I think that one of the things we've learned through COVID is how interdependent we are on each other. That we're all equals in this. That we're all in this together. And for us to be successful, we're going to have to do it all together. And then lastly, I just want to wrap up with saying, again, I want to congratulate you on 8 seasons of a podcast. And I want to tell you that it's always a great opportunity for me to be on here with you because we get a chance to do what we do best is to share our knowledge. And I urge everyone to do the same, is share your knowledge with others, be mentors. And that's where I think the value comes from what you do and that I'm a part of it. I really appreciate you having me here. And lastly, just again, thank you so much for your friendship over the years and your continued friendship as we go forward.
Thank you, Chief. And I feel the same way. I feel blessed that there are so many guests that I've had on who became more than guests. we became friends, even though we've never met in person. I still, as you said, I consider you a dear friend, a bunch of other people. And, I think, that's why we went to Zoom during COVID, is because it just wasn't right to stop. We still had to get the messages out. There was a lot going on in public safety during COVID, and a lot still. And we have to remember that, this is not totally gone. We feel it is, but I think we've learned from what happened in 2020 that we just don't always know what's around the block. But as you said, Chief, if we can put our political differences, our other things that have kept us thinking us separate from a group, we need to change our way of thinking. And as you said, we realized during COVID that we really need each other. And that's what we have to do. It's not just first responders who should take care of people. We all should take care of people and have an interest to make sure they're okay. And, we've heard on the news, knock on if you have an elderly neighbor, knock on the door, just check on them, make sure they're okay. They're doing all right. They don't need anything. But, it's all about being a human, a real human being. And we've evolved, and we're at a point where we really can learn if we want to, and we can help. And we need to want to do that, because we know that if we needed help, we want the best to be there to help us. And we have that obligation to do so as well.
We have forces that are trying to divide us in our country and in our world. And the one thing that I've always seen in the fire service is that no matter what, no matter where, no matter who, we come, we answer the call, and we provide help. And that's what the proudest thing I have of the fire service is, what we're able to do for our communities, and we cross all the boundaries.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We never think about it. We do our job. And that's what's important. We do our job. And not only do it in the fire service, law enforcement, EMS. Look, we've seen EMS slog through stuff that they never expected to do a rescue or take care of a patient. They didn't think twice. They jumped in and did what had to be done. That's who we are when we take on this mantle. As somebody once said, you got to be crazy to be a firefighter or a cop these days. Yeah, crazy in love with what we do.
Yeah, and I just have to put a shout out to all of our law enforcement friends. For my entire career, they had my back. It's time we have their back. And
absolutely.
God bless them, and thank you for your service in this very difficult time.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Folks, that's going to be the end of the show. If you're watching the video, if you're listening to the audio, we'll be back with a few other segments following that. But my sincere thanks, Chief, for your time, for sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, and your humanity with us. Because we can hear from the way you tell your story how dedicated you are to it. Not just drone responders. Once a chief, always a chief. Once a firefighter, in my book, always a firefighter. It's amazing. I get some dirty looks from my family when I tell them, well, I stopped again, another emergency. I helped somebody until fire rescue got there. You did it again? Yeah, okay. Well, that's you. That's who you are. That's who I am. I carry that BLS bag and ropes and gloves and stuff in my car. I won't go without it, because
God puts us in the places where we're needed.
Exactly. That's the big amen, Chief. That's the big amen. Folks, again, thanks for tuning in. My thanks to Chief Werner for joining with us, giving us the latest lowdown on the tech. And if you're listening to the audio, we'll be right back right after these words. For those watching the video, thank you for joining us. And we'll be back in 2 weeks with another podcast. Stay safe and stay well.